Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to the CPPR Dialogue. CPPR Dialogue is a dynamic webinar series that brings together policy experts, business leaders, and practitioners to engage in insightful discussions on contemporary policy challenges, driving informed debate and impactful solutions. In this episode of CPPR Dialogue, we present an insightful discussion on private universities in Kerala, a new chapter in higher education. I'm Jofija Francis, Senior Associate Project Administration at CPPR, and I have the privilege of being your moderator for today's discussion. It's an absolute pleasure to have you all with us today. We explore critical development in Kerala's higher education landscape, the introduction of the Kerala State Private Universities Draft Bill 2025. In this webinar, we explore the key provisions of the new legislation, its regulatory framework, and its potential impact on students, educators, and institutions. Our expert panel will discuss the opportunities and challenges ahead, focusing on quality, affordability, accessibility, and the broader vision for higher education in the state. Before we dive into today's discussion, let's take a quick look at what CPPR has been up to when it comes to Kerala Private Universities Bill. As you know, CPPR has been pretty active in driving the conversation around this bill, hosting some solid events and putting out thought-provoking content, making sure that both opportunities and challenges are out and open for the discussion. CPPR first started exploring this idea way back in 2015 by publishing an article called The Mysterious Private University Regulatory System in India. So the premise of this article emphasized the importance of private participation in higher education. In 2016, CPPR teamed up with Center for Economy Development and Law for a panel discussion called Opening Up the Higher Education Sector in Kerala, a Way Forward. Even back then, the focus was on how private universities could shake things up and bring some much needed improvements to the system. So yeah, CPPR has been pretty part of this journey from the very beginning, leading the charge when it comes to understanding and shaping the discourse on private universities in Kerala. And now that the bill is finally here in the Legislative Assembly, today's discussion couldn't be more timely. All right, with that bit of history, let's start to the real deal of today's discussion. We are fortunate to have two eminent speakers with us today, thought leaders and experts in the field of education, who will share their valuable insight and help us navigate the complexities and opportunities presented by this landmark bill. So let me take a moment to introduce our distinguished panelists. We have with us Professor Dr. G. Gokumar, a renowned political scientist and pathologist with over 4 decades of experience in teaching and research in political science. He was the former Vice Chancellor of the Central University of Kerala. He has held prestigious positions and also received numerous international and national awards and fellowships, including the Fulbright Fellowship, Trustee Mobility Fellowship. Welcome, Professor Dr. G. Gokumar. It's an honor to have you with us today.
Thank you very much. Welcome.
We have also with us Dr. Shakilati Shamsu, a leading expert in education policy and planning with over 39 years of academic experience and 14 years of service in the Government of India. She was formerly the officer in duty in the Department of Higher Education, Ministry of Education. She played a pivotal role as the Secretary to the Committee to draft the National Education Policy and the Nodal Officer of the flagship scheme, National Measures on Teachers and Teaching. Welcome, Dr. Shakilati Shamsu. We are
Thank you.
privileged
Thank
to
you
have
very much.
today.
Yeah, pleasure too.
Yeah. I'm sure that we'll have an engaging discussion ahead. I'd like to remind our viewers that you can put your questions in the YouTube comment box, which we'll be taking up towards the end of the session. So before we begin the detailed analysis of today's topic, let me briefly set up the context for our discussion today. So the bill that we are going to discuss today aims to pave the way for establishment of private universities in Kerala with goal of increasing student capacity, improving educational standards, and attracting both national and international collaboration. Provisions such as mandatory of 40% reservation for Kerala residents and guidelines for maintaining quality and affordability are designed to ensure that the benefits of private education are accessible to broader section of society. While the bill has the potential to address some of the existing gaps in higher education, it has also sparked considerable debate. Supporters argue that private universities will introduce much needed competition and innovation, but there are concerns about commercialization of education, the affordability of private institutions, and potential neglect of public universities. To set the tone of this important conversation, I would like to begin by speaking the initial thoughts of both of esteemed panelists here. So, I would like to know what is the perspective of the role of private sector in higher education. So, do you see it as a complementary force to public university or as a challenge to the existing system? I think Dr. Shakila, ma'am, may I invite you to share your views first?
Okay. Thank you, Jofi. And it is actually very pertinent that the role of the private sector is maybe in Kerala, it has started a little late in terms of this particular bill, but not in terms of accepting and acknowledging that the private sector has been a very prominent player right across the entire spectrum of education, maybe from preschool education going into secondary education, higher education, particularly in technical and medical education and management education, teacher education, and so on. And this is something that is reflective of what is happening at the national level too, where I think the presence of the private sector has been seen at one point at being very peripheral, but now it has come center stage. And in terms of numbers, if you're looking at a mind-boggling 50 to 55% students in the higher education being in the private sector. In terms of globally comparing that to even South Asia, I think India stands out among all the South Asian countries as having the largest student enrollment in the private sector, which is in that range of about 55%. And you're seeing an increasing number of these. The models are also quite different. The pure private sector, the kind of private sector participation we talked about with PPP models that we are looking at, these have all been in existence. And I think in a very globalized, liberalized world, the over increasing role of the private sector is bound to be something that we need to acknowledge. It is seeming to be inevitable. And I think all that we need to ensure is that in the drive towards acknowledging the role of the private sector, the social controls, the aspects of equity and inclusion, and preventing a blatant commercialization and profiteering must be definitely kept in check. So these are my initial thoughts, and we can get into more detailed uh, complexities and understanding in our subsequent dialogues. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you. That I think that sets an opening remark for the discussion to happen. Professor Gogoba sir, we would now look forward to hearing your perspective on this important issue.
So actually, broadly, I agree with the ideas mentioned by my co-panelist, Dr. Shakila Shamsu. And also, we are in a conceptual confusion as well regarding education, being a country with 52% of the people hungry for education, which is mind-boggling of nearly 72 crores of people, 720 million people below 26 years of age. So what position shall we take? This is a conceptual confusion. Can we consider education as a public good, and therefore the public universities are expected to support it and guide and improve the quality of education and providing access, etc.? Or the Western model, where higher education itself is more an industry than a public good, despite the fact that they are giving quality education. There is definitely the profit component, competence, and that kind of approach is there in the case of Western universities. So we are caught in between these two. We cannot take a clear position because government is dried of funds. So they cannot support on all aspects. And my co-panelist itself has helped in the drafting of NEP. I'm sure Madam will be agreeing with me when I say that the funds for education is still meager. The GDP share that we are expecting for higher education has not come, for general education has not come. So the public funded institutions are not able to provide equity and access. And the problem of quality is also another big challenge. So the other side, you have the emerging private universities. Barring Kerala, most of the states have implemented private universities. So Now, this is a big question for Kerala, considering our strong commitment to public education and public funded education, aided education. There has been so much of criticism against privatizing and self-financing program. So given the political context and also the commitment of the political leadership to provide and maximize education to the ordinary folk, how are they going to change their stand when they welcome private universities? So that's why I'm at the outset arguing that we are in a mix, in a midst, in a level of confusion too, conceptually, because where do we start from here? And what exactly is the position of the state? And how do we look at education? Because the fundamental goals like access, equity, and definitely equality, and the kind of affordability and accountability, which are all needed in the era of internationalization of education. Now, how are we going to take it up? The NEP is a wonderful policy, but no funds are coming through. The commitment to other departments are functioning, are going very well, like infrastructure, foreign policy, defense, etc. But when it comes to education, the GDP remains same or a little less for general education as well as for higher education. So we cannot take a clear position on this, and this is exactly the dilemma, considering the fact that we are the second largest educational landscape in the world after China, and also that huge number of people are waiting for education. Thank you.
All right, I think we had an insightful perspective in the very beginning itself. I think that sets the stage perfectly for us to dive deeper into the key aspects of the topic. So, to you, Dr. Shakila ma'am, so the Kerala Private Bill outlined several key criteria for the establishment of private university. I think we can go in details regarding that. A minimum endowment fund of rupees 25 crore, specified land requirement as per regulatory bodies, construction of university infrastructure covering at least 24,000 square meters, transparent governance in terms of structure and admission policies, 40% free reservations for permanent residents of Kerala. So, given your extensive experience in education policy and planning, how do you see this mandate influencing the entry of private universities in Kerala? Additionally, what impact could they have on accessibility, quality, and the overall higher education landscape of the state?
Um, I think, given what Professor Gopakumar was mentioning, the dilemma that we have in front of us, because we see seemingly sort of juxtapose the public and the private. And this being a debate whether education is a public good or it's a private good. But as someone with my own experience in the Planning Commission and in the ministry, I think I reiterate and re-emphasize the point that education remains a public good. And I don't think India, even if it happens to go on to become a 5 trillion economy and the third largest economy, can afford to ignore the fact that we have a large number of people who are outside the ambit of the elite higher education system. We have really not massified higher education. And until that happens, I think the dominance of ensuring access, balancing equity along with that, and also affordability would have to help us to sort of reaffirm the fact that we cannot afford to equate privatization with commercialization. In fact, that is a clear threat that we need to avoid, and that we should not treat the two terms as if they were synonymous. Any privatization may be seen as an inevitable reality, but you cannot say privatization must harbor commercialization and a very blatant misuse of resources for diversifying it other than educational development. That, I think, remains primarily there present even in this particular bill when they talk in terms of the 40% of the seats being for the local students, ensuring the reservation criteria, and so on. That part of it in terms of balancing affordability, in terms of balancing equity and inclusion, and respecting diversity seems to be predominant in the so-called legislation that the Kerala government has brought about. But having said that, it is equally important to understand that merely laying down these norms uh, is not adequate, particularly because I thought the bill has not really given an opportunity, or rather, it doesn't seem to be very explicit in trying to say that we will allow existing institutions which have a certain kind of benchmarks like accreditation, or they have been participating in ranking, being given a kind of a kind of a priority in terms of setting it up. It right now seems to be like an open field. Maybe the assumption is that it will not be de novo institutions, but those which are existing. And that assumption, therefore, takes in for granted that they would, in effect, either be already accredited or that they would take up accreditation. But that is missing. I mean, that is not there in the bill. You having gone through it, I did not see any reference to that, and I think it should come in because the precedence of ensuring quality through accreditation should have been built into the bill itself. And that would have put us at rest in trying to say that we are not going to allow fly-by-night operators or someone coming in with pure commercial interest, but ensuring that, yes, we will provide good quality education. Now, public and private must be seen in a complementary manner. The fact that they already are there and that we are all that we are going, it's not that Kerala did not have its share of the private sector. We have unaided colleges, we have which are there in the affiliated scenario of the institutions. We have a lot of them in, as I said, in the technical field, in the medical field, in the teacher education space. So it's already there. When you're saying you're giving the right to establish that as a private university, that is a difference. And I think we woke up nearly, I would say, a decade later, or maybe even 15 years later, to what has taken place, because the UGC, when talking about its regulations, framed that way back in 2003 in terms of regulations of what should a model private university look like. And as Professor Gopakumar rightly said, almost all the states have gone ahead establishing it, and we are the last to come in. But we must appreciate that we did not come in like some states which came in through the executive route, that we came in through the legislative route. And we are also trying to see, I think the document seems to also take all those necessary precautions to ensure that land availability, the actual infrastructure that would be done, good quality teachers, the pupil teacher, the faculty student ratios, research. But I would now feel that the private universities must harness the requirement of multidisciplinarity, harness the requirement of flexibility, harness the requirement for blending research with innovation, and at undergraduate levels, creating a culture of research, because these are some of the things that is seemingly missing in the higher education space in Kerala. And that in a certain sense is definitely undermining the quality. So I think the Kerala Private Universities Bill of 2025 is a reflection of the government's aspirations in the recently conducted Kerala's conclave, international conclave, in the larger perspective of reforms that they're looking at in terms of setting up a lot of innovation clusters and so on, which is trying to promote languages, promote research, promote setting up of a lot of other clustering centers, which is looking at niche areas. But in that whole process, the entire thrust should be not only on technology and pure sciences and so on, but also on liberal arts and the blending of all the knowledge domains to reflect multidisciplinarity. So I think that this is a welcome sort of a legislation. We need to have our red flags with regard to ensuring that it doesn't get commercialized, but we should also be able to put in a lot of inputs to ensure that the private universities that come in are able to innovate in terms of the curricula, in terms of ensuring that they are globally following an international curricula that would in a certain sense stem migration that we are also seeing, and blending a lot of research and new emerging areas so that we look at skilling, we look at employability, we look at higher order abilities of our students, so that it is in sync. On one side, you had Invest Kerala happening and trying to leverage a lot of funds coming in. You have a lot of global companies setting up their campus spaces here. The education is the feeder, and these two must harmonize together in a perfect blend. Only then, I think, the larger macro picture of creating a knowledge society, which is citizen centric and so on, would actually get translated on ground.
Thank you, ma'am. I think it was actually a detailed insight into the potential impact of this criteria on accessibility and quality have really helped to clarify the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead. I think I like the notion of how you developed to say that education being considered as public good, but when we say about private university entries, it must not harbor to the term commercialization. I think this has to be very seriously analyzed. It's valuable to hear how policy frameworks can shape the higher education landscape, etc. I think it has to be considered in your very technical terms also, like when you say all of these things, it should not be put under the term in commercialization. That should be very taken into keen address. So now the question is to you, Gauba sir. So the other states in India have already experimented with private universities for some time now, each with varying degrees of success and unique challenges. Drawing from your deep expertise in comparative politics and policy analysis, how does Kerala's private university bill compare to similar legislation in other states? Additionally, based on the experience of those states, what potential challenges should Kerala anticipate in implementing the bill, and what policy safeguards could help mitigate those issues?
Very interesting point you have made. From the angle of a comparative perspective, Kerala has a lot of concerns, issues, and challenges. When private universities came in a big way in most of the Indian states, they were also posed with the problem that the level of massification of education or the expansion of higher education was relatively low compared to one or two states, but Kerala was dominating on the other side with a strong history of public funded education system. But when private universities came in other states, particularly in the north, we have seen huge investment coming. Some of them from corporate, some of them from non-governmental organizations, some of them from individual donors. So investment has come in a major way, and they have also brought in policies that could help in terms of improving the quality, bringing excellent infrastructure. I will cut short in one sentence and say, except the salaries of the teachers, barring very few universities, very few private universities, barring the salaries of the teachers, everything else, the private university sector in the other states of India has been doing, by and large, a reasonably good job. I don't know why they are not giving proper salaries to the teachers. I'm not mentioning the prestigious universities like Shivanadar or Ashoka University. They are paying very well. But most of the universities, they are not paying proper salaries to the teachers. The fees are relatively high, and therefore, only the person who can afford can definitely pay or contribute. And there may be only very limited scholarships, and I was told their reservation is almost nil. So when coming in a comparative perspective, when it comes to Kerala, this is going to be a very big challenge. Because those who are going to invest in higher education from private universities angle, the initial leadership would come from the actors inside, mostly the religious organizations, the diaspora-led people who can invest in Kerala. Since they have a lot of money, they can't invest in other sectors of Kerala. So the kind of management coming to the field and the nature of investment they are making, I'm at a loss to understand how they are going to make it cost effective. I'm not using the word profit, but making it cost effective. Already the government is insisting for 40% reservation. I was told in Uttar Pradesh there is no reservation in private universities. Will Kerala follow this model of not providing space for reservation, or at least few seats reserved for the most backward communities or Dalits, and the government willing to pay a part of it and sponsoring them? Is it going to come? Or the universities themselves should say 10% instead of 40% will be earmarked for the backward communities, Dalits or the other sections. So this is a big problem. Reservation is going to be a very big problem. And those who are going to afford it, because we now know very well that more than 2.5 lakhs of Keralite students migrated to other countries. So if we want to bring them back, or at least we want to arrest this process of student migration, the quality has to be high. Fees, of course, probably those who can go outside may be willing to pay that much. Whether the courses are related to employment, to what extent it can be made job intensive and also the new pedagogy that can be applied. So a lot of factors come before the management, and unless the management becomes professional, in the sense that they know the purpose, this is not like opening a supermarket. They have to realize how they have to run an education institution, what kind of inputs are to be provided, how the infrastructure is to be properly ordered, and how teacher recruitment should take place, and how are you going to pay for the teachers? Because we know very well, even in Kerala, the private educational sector in Kerala, which is prevailing now, the salaries are very meager. They are not a university, they are part of the state-funded university, but salaries are very meager. So how are you going to deal with that? And how you are going to set up infrastructure and also provision for extracurricular activities, outcome-based education, and a lot of activities where the students' qualities can be brought out. So this is not an easy job. So in Delhi and other places, say you have prestigious universities, very professional universities coming up, and they are able to set up that because they have the kind of connection, they are also kind of guidance being provided by those leadership coming with international experience on higher education. With that kind of limitation, it is not that easy. So from a comparative perspective, I must say, we have infrastructural limitations, we have political challenges, the social context and the ecosystem prevailing in Kerala is very different. And are we going to develop a special educational zone? Say, for instance, like in Kochi or in Trivandrum, where our technoparks have been set up, the government, the state governments have also set up special economic zone. So are we going to set up special educational zones? Because anybody who is aware of Kerala's student politics and campus politics know very well that students are a very important political force to reckon with. So how are you going to manage with this? And this cannot be provided in the law. And whether the students would come out and say, like in other government-funded institution, we also need elections, student fund, student councils. So many questions come, and I don't know whether the leadership or the management who is interested to set up the universities here or the private universities here are able to understand the local situation, although they are also part of Kerala. And when it comes to private, as the whole controversy again comes back, NEP suggested that if you raise profit from private universities, the money should be pumped back to the private sector only, or the private educational sector. Well, that is a good idea if you can reinvest back in education. But are they going to do that? And how are you going to keep up the quality of education? And of course, we need, as Madam said regarding accreditation, after some time, the lakh visits become important. And how are you going to manage with the quality upgradation? So a lot of issues are coming, mainly because the educational context in Kerala is vastly different from the context you see in other states. Even Tamil Nadu, for example, or any state in the north, for example, if you take, you'll find so much of difference, because there has been massification of education in Kerala for decades and as a result of which the gross enrollment ratio has gone up. Although Tamil Nadu is slightly higher than us, Kerala is following behind. And this dilemma, whether you are able to limit or arrest the migration of the students to foreign countries, I think a lot of things have to be taken up by the government as well as by those who are going to sponsor the private universities. So all these are raising very big issues, and these issues are not simply managerial issues. These are also administrative issues. These are political issues. These are also cultural issues. So all these problems will come, and the context and also the traditional narrative about higher education, and it is not going in tandem with the concerns and the goals and interests of the private universities. So there will be problems. So from a comparative perspective, there will be more challenges in Kerala than in other states. That is my conclusion. There will be more challenges in Kerala than in other states, because if you avoid reservation, there will be challenge. If you charge high fees, there will be challenge. And if the teachers' salaries are not paid up to the mark, there will be challenge. So all these are going to raise fundamental questions. And I think both the government as well as the private sector should be sensitive and should find ways and means through which they can address this problem in a rational way. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Professor. It was an insightful comparison. I mean, like you were able to analyze how similar laws have played a pivotal role in other states, looking into the past, and you were also able to tell that salaries of the teachers in other states are a little low when private universities are offering, and also you were able to post the potential challenges Kerala might face provides in terms of managerial, administration, political, and cultural issues. So, and he was also able to cover the significant student migration issue that we face today. I think, giving all that context, I think we could build on that point itself. So, Dr. Shakila ma'am, Kerala has witnessed a significant student migration to other states and countries, largely due to limited access to quality higher education and a lack of internationally recognized qualifications. So, in the context of current legal framework, do you think the private universities have the potential to fill those gaps and offer a viable solution to this problem?
Yeah, so the student migration that Kerala started witnessing post 2020 after COVID, I think was in a certain sense triggered by the fact that a number of students who were homebound, who were sort of confined to homes, were realizing about what international campuses offer, and the kind of liberal arts education that they had, where options were there. Also, the feeling that it sort of had a very stable kind of an educational calendar, academic calendar, without a lot of disruption that tends to happen in our state. May have been many, these are not, I mean, a very recent publication that QSAT had brought out, and during the book launch that we had a discussion on NEP, highlights some of these reasons. And many of the students who went have also got quite disillusioned that it is not just the quality of education, but that when you situate that education in the local context, given the rising nationalism that you are seeing globally across the world, and the fact that jobs do not come in to meet with the living expenses, there is a lot of disillusionment. Now, we don't get to hear that part of it, because students who have already taken a decision to go outside would like to paint a rosy picture. And I think now you are seeing that there is a more, I would say, two sides of the coin being understood. And you are seeing that it is no longer seen as a sort of an ultimate goal that an undergraduate student wants to go to a university outside Kerala. But it is a part of global phenomenon. One must also understand that one cannot attribute a reason that it is the falling standards of quality of public education in Kerala, because if you go by what Niti Aayog has said in its latest report, and that is, I was also pretty surprised to note that the per unit cost spending on every student is the highest in Kerala across all the states in this country. Now, this was something that came out quite as a surprise, because we thought that Kerala is not investing enough in higher education. But what is also to be recognized is that we look at higher education without saying school education. And in terms of the performance indicators that Niti Aayog again studies for school performance indicators, Kerala stands around second or third. So are we having certain inbuilt biases that we generally tend to have, that no, Kerala's school education is bad, Kerala's higher education is bad, we are not investing enough? And I'm not trying to say the other side, because that is borne out by data, that is borne out by studies conducted by bodies like Niti Aayog, and they have said this information. Now, curbing migration cannot seem to be a solution, because, as I said, it is an inevitable part. Kerala has always seen migration for jobs. Kerala has seen that the jobs which were going to the Gulf started moving to European countries and the Western countries. So migration was never an issue. And we used to always see that the Keralite is always outward bound and not limited like many other states where they don't really venture out. That is because we are able to take that kind of a gamble and a risk when saying that we will go out for it. So that is there in the sort of a DNA that we have, that we don't think that we need to be confined geographically within the boundaries of the state. We did it for jobs outside and so on. But what I would like to say is that Kerala attracts a lot of tourist population in terms of people coming in to see Kerala. And if we are looking at Kerala becoming an education hub, while the phenomenon may happen, maybe some of these efforts like the private universities bill, where you have very innovative courses, might curb the trend to some extent. Like Professor Gopakumar was saying, maybe it will arrest the kind of very large numbers going out, because you are getting good quality education, you are able to pay for it, and therefore you can be over here. And since these private universities get more autonomy in terms of having joint degrees and dual degrees, and sort of embrace the idea of internationalization, many would feel that being in your own home state, you may still be able to get good quality education. That is there. But the question is Kerala doing enough to attract other students from other parts of the country into our universities, which maybe private universities can think of? Because you will be able to extend the labor migration to look at student migration inbound into Kerala from other states, and also globally. Are we able to think of, for the international schools that we have over here, we are seeing a substantive diaspora population sending their children to these schools. Those children may continue in private universities, and therefore you may see that phenomenon happening. So it's not just what we are seeing, the current problem of the outbound students, but we are able to look at other opportunities that the private universities can do, where, of course, except for ensuring that 40% for the local and so on, but to do away with reservation completely, as Professor Gopakumar was saying, let me play the devil's advocate. When some of them have done away with it has really made it like a very small, exclusive cake to be eaten. And I don't think we are, at least Kerala at this stage is not in a position to do that. And I think we may take some time, and maybe we can think of it at a later stage. But at this stage, cross-subsidization of fees can be a possibility, so that you have differential fee structures. We don't explore that possibility at all, so that the rich is paying more and those who are not affording can be given a lower cut of fees. And wherever it is still not possible, you have your scholarships and free ships being provided, which can again be sponsored by the industry. You see, the role of the industry in addressing equity issues, which we have been saying since the time we wrote the role of the private sector participation and the creation of a fund and so on, has not really been coming forward. That also needs to come in. So curbing student migration is one thing that seems to be dominating our minds, but I think it's a normal global phenomenon, and things do a correction on its own. And I think already that kind of correction is happening because of the kind of international politics, seeing a lot of very high degree of nationalistic views happening, and not many governments seeming to be welcoming a lot of migrant student population coming in. So you will see that phenomenon definitely impacting. But doing the existing private universities leveraging this legislation to ensure that they can have a very diverse student population, which is international, which is from other states, and yet offering good quality, innovative programs of multidisciplinarity, weaving in skilling, all these, including research, becomes very, very important. I think then they will be able to set a benchmark. And once they set a benchmark, then I think other aspects fall into place. And as I said, differential fee structure, the industry coming in terms of operating a number of activities, even in private universities, they can be part of a kind of arrangement, a collaborative arrangement with the private players. They may not have found it, the industry may not have found it very enabling to collaborate with public funded because of the existing regulations, but there are lesser likelihood of regulatory limitations coming in when it comes to the private universities, and therefore a collaboration. And mind you, collaboration is the key to all 21st century education, and the need therefore of collaborating with technoparks, like through setting up of special education zones, collaborating with industry, collaborating with new emerging niche areas that are happening, collaborating with foreign institutions, many of these things. I would feel that the student migration as a consequence of, because of the private universities getting stemmed, maybe a kind of a far-stretched connect that we are trying to make. But yes, I would feel that many Kerala parents may feel that if you have good quality international curricula being offered through private universities, which will definitely be still more affordable than going outside and living outside, may somehow see a marginal number of students rethinking on this option of going outside. And maybe in that sense, we may be addressing that issue of migration.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. Actually, I liked how you put forward saying that student migration from Kerala cannot be attributed solely to the declining performance of the education sector, because we always tend to do say that, because increasing student migration is always associated with declining education quality. But the point you actually made clear is that Kerala has a strong public investment in education and a well-established academic culture. So I think by allowing well-regulated private universities, fostering global collaboration and improving student infrastructure, Kerala can not only retain local students but also attract some students from other states and countries. I think this is an area we can have actually a large discussion going on because we have the potential to do so. So, building on that, Professor Dr. Govikumar, how do you see the international collaboration and raising academic standards as a key to enhance the reputation and competitiveness of higher education institutions? What policy measures and incentives do you think could encourage private universities in Kerala to collaborate with international institutions and ensure a global academic standard?
Well, my initial response is that to a great extent, it depends upon the leadership that is coming at the level of the private universities. I'm sure there won't be any dearth of vision from the part of the leadership, like vice chancellors, professors, other kinds of faculty. If they are going to hire the best faculty and also the best leadership in the form of registrar, vice chancellor, deans, and others, I'm sure with their kind of experience in the past, and also the fact that now we are living in the age of internationalization of higher education, there are no strings to control them. I think when the draft policy is being made for private universities, the government should not insist for unnecessary regulation. Because even for public funded universities, internationalization of higher education and collaboration with the rest of the universities outside the country are now catching up. People like myself and many others, even from the social science angle, we have done collaboration at the global level working in public funded universities. So now this is the era where sky is the limit for collaboration if you have the vision, and also you have the interest to go for interdisciplinary courses, and also those courses which will develop skill, augment better job-oriented courses and programs. So there are enough opportunities across the world, and the government should not unnecessarily regulate them, at least in terms of internationalization. Because internationalization demands flexibility, auditability, accountability, and these things should be done without any kind of delay, unlike the red tapist conventional bureaucratic approach of many public funded universities. Of course, even there the system is changing to the needs of the time. So the policy and the bill that is being prepared should also take into account the possibility and the potentials of internationalization and collaboration that are needed, because these are things which are very essential, not only for science and engineering or technology or mathematics, even for humanities and social sciences and for general education. These are becoming highly essential. Here, I would also add a few more points, like, say, for example, if the private universities hire the best faculty, it is likely that faculty working in public funded institutions inside Kerala or outside Kerala, or you can hire people from other places as well. So the teaching community is going to be very important. Of course, it will create initially a setback for the public funded universities, because many of the quality teachers might migrate to the private universities, probably because the public funded university teachers may feel, of course, I did 20 years or 25 years. Now let me do the next decade of service in a private university. So they'll be happy. But initially that can create a setback to the public funded universities. But ultimately what we require, because both the public funded universities and the private university should complement each other and compete each other. These two things are vital. Although they compete and the levels of comparison may be different, but ultimately complementarities also should come. Let me also add that if you want to restrict the flow of student migration to foreign countries, the field and the scenario has to change, not only at the level of education, but in the general potentials of employment opportunity of Kerala. If Kerala can provide sufficient jobs for the youth, definitely the student migration can be limited. One of the main reasons why students are moving outside is because they not only wanted to study there, they wanted to work there. Initially ad hoc jobs and later regular jobs. Can we create a situation in Kerala? I'm sure the bulk of the student migration to the Western countries can be restricted. So the private universities bill should anticipate all these things. So my suggestion is that the government should leave a lot of areas quite open and flexible. Because if you try to bring in points like you should get central government's permission, state government permission before you go for collaboration, or before you try to get a patent abroad. Now, when you try to bring in that kind of regulatory approach, definitely the private universities bill will be defeated. I'm sure such things has to be avoided, and much to be filled later by the kind of action and the kind of work that is going to come. So it all depends upon the academic leadership that is going to emerge in the private universities. I'm not sure whether the state government is fully aware of all these things, because as a matter of fact, we had absolutely no experience in private universities. The self-financing sector was a fiasco in Kerala. It is not private university, it is a self-financing sector. The quality of education in self-financed sector was very poor. You look at the engineering colleges, you look at the medical colleges, even the pass percentage was very, very low. Are we going to repeat of the self-financing colleges in the private universities? I'm sure no. So if you want to really develop educational hub in Kerala, what we have to do is that the government should invite the right kind of people to set up the universities, and that should not be a reenactment of the self-financing colleges of Kerala, initiated by certain powerful pressure groups, communal pressure groups. Now, those things will not work out. It is a level where you find privatization moving in a higher level, and there, of course, the competition will go beyond our control. Of course, there are many issues coming in the way. As I raised the fundamental question, is it whether it can be a public good or an industry? Those issues will come forth, no doubt about that. But is Kerala going to change? Are we going to change? So this education that way, particularly private universities built, if it wanted to succeed, it depends upon the variables like the general employment opportunities in Kerala, outcome-based education sector in Kerala, the level of industrialization that Kerala can contribute, and if such possibilities of industrialization and job opportunities can be developed throughout Kerala with the new programs and ideas, and also we try to bring in the right kind of courses, novel courses, innovative programs, practical-oriented ideas, etc., then not only the education landscape will change, the whole landscape of Kerala, particularly in relation to services, industry, construction, agriculture, all these areas, there will be a dramatic change. And that can lead to paradigm shift. But again, I must say, with a word of caution, we have to take things with a spirit of commitment, and also to see that we are entering into an area of risk and competition. And the political leadership should be willing to accept this, and therefore the act, before it is becoming an act, the bill should provide lot of space for the private university sector to offer their flexibility in terms of collaboration, in terms of tie-ups, in terms of dual degrees. So all these things are possible. There is nothing that limit them. But we need the right kind of people, right from the vice chancellor to that of an assistant professor, or in the level of students, dean students welfare, or in the level of the kind of counseling that can be offered, or the job placement cell, or the concerns about the new courses. So to what extent the academic council can become highly professional? I was told that in private universities outside Kerala, some of the universities has provided even nomination for students in the academic council, so that students' interest and their concerns, particularly that will augment their career growth. So the representation is given at the academic council also. In comparison, in Kerala, you can find a student representation not only in academic council, but also in senate and syndicate, but it is highly political. So there is a big difference between these two. So how to ensure professionalism is important point. So to bring in that kind of professionalism, absolutely the bill should be sufficiently provided with the kind of flexibility and with imagination. Only then things will work. I think I was reminded that so great educationists like late Professor Menon, such people are not with us, who could have given a lot of ideas. Madhav Menon, Professor N.R. Madhav Menon. That kind of leadership is very important. So that kind of personalities are there to guide and help, definitely the bill will be more rational in character. So and again, one more caution is that the MLAs sitting in the assembly who are expected to draft this policy or approve this policy may not be aware of the changing ecosystem. So the situation is not that easy. So we have to convince all the stakeholders, the political leadership, the educational leadership, the students and the parents, and also the larger industrial ecosystem. So all these factors are to be considered and factored in before the bill is properly drafted and finalized and presented before the Legislative Assembly and for its final approval. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Like broadly, we were able to cover like more aspects of this topic. And I think in YouTube, we are getting so many questions. It seems like we are having some fantastic participation in YouTube chat also. So I think we can just quickly take to a few questions from YouTube chat also. Um, so the so yeah, the question is like transparent governance is essential under the bill. How can the state establish an independent regulations body to ensure compliance, resolve disputes, and uphold academic integrity? Yeah, maybe Shakila ma'am, do you want to answer this?
Yeah, so I think it is almost echoing what Professor Gopakumar was mentioning, that the key to the success of private universities greatly depends on the quality of the academic leadership and its internal governing bodies, which need to function with some standard operating protocols, which balance autonomy and accountability, which balances flexibility, learner centricity, and public probity. The need to use technology for public probity rather than going in through an inspection Raj kind of a thing, which in the recent times the NAC visit had shown the counter effects of it, where in the NEP we talked about using technology rather than in terms of physical visits that we are talking. And I think NAC has brought that about. In the same way, in the internal governance, I think we need to have certain instrumentalities put in place. Because of my NEP background, it would be not wrong to say, if already the institution has a very clearly articulated institutional development plan, which clearly sets the vision and the mission and the objectives of the institution, looks about all the 5 goals of access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability from the lens of saying what our the governing bodies will use as benchmarks to be achieved, and a kind of let us say almost an impossible dream that I am talking about, with very less external interference from both governmental and extra governmental interferences. If we can create an insulated kind of a scenario of that kind, that calls for a lot of professionalism, that calls for a lot of internal checks and balances. And I think it is not that it is not doable, especially because in the recent conclave, international conclave, there's a lot of Kerala diaspora who want to get back here. And that is a very, very welcome development that we are seeing. Many of us who are outside Kerala for a substantial part of time also are now here as part of trying to ensure that Kerala is able to showcase. But yes, the instrumentalities, lack of the abstaining of bodies to interfere and come in the way, having a balance between autonomy and accountability, these are very, very essential, that we don't burn our fingers having brought in the private universities act, I mean, whenever it becomes an act.
Yeah, I think we have one more interesting question in the YouTube chat. Like there are pretty much questions, but I think since the time is not permitting, I'll only take one more question. That is like, why can't the government grant university status to some of the well-known and long-established autonomous private college? What can be done for that in terms of legal hurdles, if any? I think Gopakumar sir, you will be the one who can answer this question in very certain manners.
Yeah. See, this is also a very interesting turning point,
Yeah.
because Kerala government aligned with the UGC idea of autonomy, but in the process, very few public funded direct institutions showed interest to transform to become autonomous institutions. If you take nearly 16 or 17 autonomous colleges in Kerala, how many of them are really under the government sector? They are aided, but most of them, 95% of them are from the aided sector. So the direct government colleges shied away, and the government was willing to give, and they gave to Maharaja's College, Ernakulam, for example. So these autonomous colleges, our experience in Kerala is that reasonable autonomy was given in curriculum, But when it comes to the examination, when it comes to the financial part, autonomy was restricted. So it was a limited autonomy concept that was being practiced. And I think the question was focusing on the probability whether the autonomous colleges can transform to become private universities. At the outset, I must say, the vision was that some of these autonomous colleges will emerge as private universities. But the challenge before the autonomous colleges is that if the moment that you move out of aided sector and then you become private university, who will pay the cost for the teachers? And where will be the subsidized education? So my feeling is that autonomous colleges may shy of applying to become a private universities. Rather, there can be initiatives for private universities coming from related sectors, related institutions, but not the autonomous colleges transforming to become private universities. Because the dilemma is that the funding part will be lost, and the kind of support that the government is giving to many departments, many courses, and also the salaries given to the teachers, everything will be cut. So therefore, this autonomous colleges whose performance was relatively good, but not, I won't say in absolute terms, but and also the government was not giving full autonomy to the extent to which they should have been given. And further that private universities initiative shall come from other actors, as mentioned here, the diaspora, the people who are there in Gulf, in Europe, in America, Canada, those people can also help us in setting private universities in Kerala. And further, the initiatives can come from other kind of public-private funded people, and there has been so much of initiatives catching up. And I know money is a very important factor. So only those who can afford to invest can do that. So that investment part becomes very crucial. So that is how I would respond to this question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this has been an insightful discussion, and I truly wish we could continue. But as a moderator, I don't want to wrap it also. But since we have reached the end of our time slot, I think it's time to conclude the discussion. So as we wrap up this insightful discussion, I think it's clear from today's discussion that while Kerala private university bills open up significant opportunities for improving higher education, thoughtful policy implementation, robust regulatory oversight, and strategic partnership will be a crucial part in ensuring the long-term success of this. So, before we wrap up this session, on behalf of CPPR, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to the esteemed speakers, Professor Dr. G. Gokumar and Dr. Shakila T. Shamsu, for sharing your valuable insight and deep expertise on such a pivotal topic. Like your perspectives have provided us with comprehensive understanding of how Kerala Private University Bill could shape the future of higher education in the state, from improving academic standards and enhancing accessibility to fostering global collaborations and strengthening the ecosystem. So, and to our audience, like really thank you for being such an engaged and thoughtful group. Like there are so many questions coming up, but since time is not permitting, I was not able to pick all the questions. But I think your questions and participation have truly enriched the discussion. So this webinar is the part of CPPR Dialogue series where we aim to foster meaningful conversations on policy and governance issues that matter. So there will be more sessions on this series exploring different dimensions of this private universities bill and its implications for Kerala's higher education landscape. So please stay tuned. Lastly, we invite all the audience to keep following CPPR's social media channels for more updates, insights, and details about our upcoming events. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you our next session. Thank you.
Thank you, Jofi,
Thank you.
Good evening to Professor Gopakumar and
Thank you.
to all those who are viewing the program. Thank you very much. Yeah.